Just want to showcase this post here from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here. Just going to read a little bit right off the top, in which he says this: 7 days of large-scale Russian attacks on Ukraine, over 1,800 drones, more than 1,200 guided aerial bombs, and 83 missiles of various types. The Russians are intensifying terror against cities and communities to increasingly intimidate our people. Joining us now to discuss this even further is Clifford May, the founder and president for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Clifford, thanks so much. Good to see you on this Sunday.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right, so break it down here for our viewers. A lot has been happening really throughout the last several years, but in the last several days as well. Tell us a little bit more of these details. Russian attacks down there in Ukraine, and the attacks also conducted toward Russia by Ukraine.
Well, the main thing is that Vladimir Putin has been escalating. We're talking what you just saw. It's been raining missiles, drones, guided aerial vehicles, and Putin is mainly attacking residential districts. He's attacking civilians. It's very much a terrorist war that he's waging. Why? Because he wants to break the will of the Ukrainian people, have them accept that he is the czar, that they have to be ruled by him from the Kremlin. That's exactly what they don't want, because this war, from their point of view, is all about preserving their independence, their freedom, their sovereignty, their culture, their language, all of which Putin wants to wipe out. And again, he is escalating and has over the past week or so, targeting across Ukraine, civilians, women, children, hospitals. That's the way he's waging this war.
I think it would be worth talking a little bit about where each of these nations stand in terms of the capabilities that they have, the weapons that they have in their arsenal to continue on with these attacks. If we're looking at both of them and the position that they're in right now, how would you describe that?
Well, Putin has everything he has and is using everything he has. The problem that for Ukraine has been that they haven't had enough of an anti-missile defense systems. They need Patriot missiles. Now, the good news is that President Trump has said, after there seemed to be a halt coming from the Pentagon, no, these people need to be able to defend themselves. I'm going to continue to send munitions to them, largely defensive. I think they need offensive, long-range missiles, ATACMS, and they need not to be restricted as they were in the Biden era, that they can only fire these against Russian forces on Ukrainian territory. The Ukrainians need to be able to hit military targets inside Russia so that Putin feels the pain. The Ukrainians are not interested in hitting civilians. They're interested in hitting military targets. Again, Putin hits civilian targets because he's waging a terrorist war. Much more is needed. Also, economic sanctions. The good news is that there is a bill. I think the president's going to support it. Senator Lindsey Graham has been behind it. It's got like 82 or 84, I can't quite remember, co-sponsors. It would put serious economic pressure on Putin as well. And keep in mind, Putin is very much allied with North Korea, which has sent troops and huge amounts of munitions. He's allied with Communist China, and he's allied with Tehran, which is weaker now, thanks to both Trump and the Israelis and what they did during the 12-day war. So what I'm saying is that Ukraine needs help so that they can defend themselves better and also make it more painful for Putin to continue this terrorist and unlawful war.
Bringing us out to this image that we have at the White House, because I want to talk about the Trump administration. You mentioned it briefly there, Cliff. And earlier this week, the Associated Press reporting that the U.S. is selling weapons to its NATO allies in Europe so they can provide them to Ukraine as it struggles to fend off a recent escalation in Russia's drone and missile attacks. During the first few months of the president's second term there inside of the Oval Office, he was really focused on these negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Most recently, we've heard that he has continued to have some of those talks with Russia. However, he is not happy with the way that those have gone. What is the sentiment that we're hearing today from the White House in terms of how they're not necessarily trying to get involved, but they're trying to stop this war as a whole?
Or no, it's gotten very clear. Look, Putin, I'm sure, has been saying earlier on, or had been saying earlier on, I'd like to stop this war, but we have to get at the root causes. You have to understand. And what Trump has come around to understanding is, as he put it, that Putin is tagging him along, that Putin is bull. Well, you know the rest of the phrase, and I think he's gotten more clear that Putin is not interested in ending this struggle because what he wants is not peace. What he wants is victory, and victory means he conquers Ukraine and makes it into either a colony of Russia or into a vassal state like Belarus. It's not really independent or free anymore. A colony like Chechnya. That's what it is, a colony of Russia. I do think that President Trump has grown more realistic about Putin and understands a little better who he is, and that's why he is beginning to do what he has said for a long time he could do, put, as he put it, devastating pressure on Putin. And that's the only way you're going to get, not to peace, by the way. I think what you could get to is a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities, essentially a frozen conflict, which would probably last a fairly long time. If you don't do that, Putin will conquer Ukraine, and then he will turn his guns and the guns he takes over in Ukraine towards the West, towards NATO members.
So that's a similar sentiment to what we heard earlier this week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he was in Rome, Italy. He participated in this conference talking about the rebuilding and the recovery of Ukraine going forward. And he mentioned something that I'd like to touch on briefly here, to the effects of the climate and how it's going to change with the seasons, more specifically with winter. And winter is something that is almost on Russia's side. So what really are the next steps right now that Ukraine is focused on as we head into these bitterly cold months of this war?
Well, first of all, what you had in Italy was a sort of demonstration of optimism because people were talking about how Ukraine will recover from this war when it ends. And as we've discussed, we're not anywhere close to an ending, but they talked about what would happen, who would be involved in reconstruction. The money was pledged. They said Russia couldn't be involved in any reconstruction. I give the Italians and others, the Italians who hosted it, did a good job in showing their support for Ukraine. It's important, and NATO members get this, that they are supporting Ukraine in its fight to defend itself against Putin because they don't want to have to defend themselves on their own territory. We've got the whole summer to go through before and again, we've got an escalation by Putin going on right now, and that needs to be forced back. What happens in the wintertime? It's hard to say. Yes, the ground becomes cold, tanks move, but among the things that are quite interesting in this war is that the Ukrainians have been rather ingenious in terms of building all kinds of new drones and utilizing those drones to knock out tanks, to knock out infantry troops. But you see development on the Russian side as well. The Russians are turning out huge numbers of drones themselves and using them against the Ukrainians, again, against civilians as well as military. America and the NATO members are learning from what's going on, and they're learning at the expense of the Ukrainians who are fighting and dying to contain Putin, who has designs to really bring down NATO and this is what he wants to do: restore the Russian/Soviet Empire, which was at its largest under Stalin, which is why Putin has been erecting statues of Stalin, more than 100, including one not long ago in a metro station in Moscow. That shows who he is and what he believes in.
Speaking of NATO, I want to put up this post from Reuters, a clip here saying that NATO's route to meet with Trump in Washington next week. What do you have your eye on in terms of this meeting?
No question about it. Rutte has been doing a very good job as the head of NATO. He's been doing a good job, I think, making clear to Trump that that NATO is a partner. Its members are more than ever partners, not dependents. That had been Trump's complaint, and it was a valid complaint. And Ruto will be saying to him, look, here's the things I think we need to do to support Ukraine and frustrate the ambitions of Vladimir Putin. That's going to be his message. He'll talk about progress. He'll talk about what happened in Italy. He'll talk about the spending of key NATO members. And he'll talk I think, very much about the specific weaponry that the Ukrainians need. Patriot missiles is part of it. He'll talk about the defense industrial base in the U.S., which needs rebuilding, so as it does in Europe. And he'll talk about ways that the Ukrainians can be helped to develop their defense industrial base, because they can make drones and other weapons faster pretty much than anybody else in NATO if they have the financing and if they have the support. He'll be talking about how best to support Ukraine at this point. And again, I think he does a good job. I think he understands Trump, and I think he'll be rather persuasive. So I'm optimistic about that.
Cliff, finally, I do have some footage of some of these strikes that we have been seeing between Russia and Ukraine. I want to put them up on the screen for our viewers, and I'd like you to just add really any of your final thoughts, what you're really watching out for going forward, or perhaps some tidbits or some notes that you think our viewers should be aware of as we follow this war.
Yeah, what you're seeing, not least in Kiev, and I think I see from that this is Kiev. Yeah, the terrorist attacks from the skies, the raining down of missiles and drones, has caused fires throughout a lot of Kiev and a lot of other cities in Ukraine. And again, the idea here that Putin has is to destroy the will of the Ukrainians to defend themselves. And I don't think it's working. The Ukrainians know this is a war of independence, that they absolutely need to win if they are to keep their independence, their freedom, their sovereignty, their culture, their language. Putin also has done things, I just want to mention this because it's so egregious. His troops have been stealing Ukrainian children. They're brought back to Russia. They're brainwashed. They're taught not to speak Ukrainian, not to think of themselves as Ukrainian, but only Russia as Russians. And that's part of what Putin wants to do. His population has been falling. He wants to add another 40 million or so Russians. They think of themselves as Ukrainians. They don't think of themselves as Russians. He's saying, you will be Russians. And if so, I will use you for whatever purposes I want. With a bayonet in the back, I will force you to go west into NATO countries. That's not good for Europe. That's not good for the US. It's in our interest to support the Ukrainians who are fighting a common enemy in Vladimir Putin, again, who is aligned with the Communist Party of China, the Islamists in Tehran, and the dynastic dictatorship in North Korea.
Clifford May, founder and president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at Live Now from Fox. We're going to continue to follow this story, so we'll be checking in soon.
Thank you.